Hello, viewers. Welcome back to World News. My name is Manny. Today I'm going to discuss about an Indian scientist named Nambi Narayanan who got arrested and got under police custody. He suffered too much under police custody, and the case against the fake spy scandal that blew up this rocket scientist complete career and happiness, life, everything spoiled. It was fake, totally fake. After a while, after many years, it came to the light that it was a fake case. So in one interview conducted with Mr. Narayanan, he remembered that days. He explained in his words. He told me one winter one winter afternoon he was sitting in front of his house. Some policemen arrived at house in a narrow lane in the northern city of Trivandrum, the capital of Kerala, capital city of Kerala. The officers were polite and respectful. The police officers, Nambi Narayanan remembers. They told the space scientist that their boss, a deputy inspector general of police, wanted to talk to him. So he asked to them whether he got under arrest or. Then the police officers they told no. There were no arrest warrant and it's just an inquiry to see. It was 30th November 1994. The 53-year-old scientist led the Indian Space Agency's cryogenic rocket engine project and was responsible for acquiring the technology from Russia. Mr. Narayanan walked out to the waiting police vehicle and he asked whether he should sit in the front or back, and suspects were usually dumped in the back seat of the police because before taking them to the police station and taking to the remand and custody. It was the normal procedure, but in this case policemen asked him to sit in the front, and very politely the jeep rolled out to the police station. When they arrived at police station, the boss wasn't there. So Mr. Narayanan was asked to wait on a bench. So the policemen gaped at him as they passed by. They had that look as if they were looking at someone who had done some crime, Mr. Narayanan says. He waited and waited, and the boss didn't come up. As night fell, he dozed off on the bench. When he woke up next morning, he was told he was under arrest. A scrum of journalists had arrived, and within hours, newspapers were describing him as a traitor, a man who had sold rocket technology to Pakistan. After falling into a honey trap set by two women from Maldives, his life was never the same again. Before Nambi Narayanan was the first boy in the middle class family. After 5 girls, his father was a businessman trading in coconut kernel and fiber. His mother stayed at home to look after the children. Young Nambi was good student and topped his senior class. He went to an engineering school, got a degree and worked in sugar factory for a while before joining the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO. I was always had a fascination for aircrafts and flying objects, he says. At the agency, he rose rapidly through the ranks until he won scholarship to study rocket propulsion system at Princeton University, he rejoined the space agency when he returned home a year later. At ISRO, Mr. Narayanan worked with stalwarts of India's space program, scientists like Vikram Sarabhai, its founder and its chairman, Satish Dhawan, his successor, and Abdul Kalam, who later became India's 11th president. When I began working with ISRO, the space organization was in its infancy. We never usually had a plan of developing any rocket systems. We were planning to use rockets from US and France to fly our payloads, Mr. Narayanan says. But the plan changed and Mr. Narayanan became a key figure in the project to develop homegrown Indian rockets. He worked diligently as scientist until his life was turned upside down in November 1994. A month before his arrest, the Kerala police had arrested a Maldivian woman, Mariam Rashida, on charge of overstaying her visa. Weeks later, they picked up her friend Fauzia Hassan, a bank worker visiting from Mali, the capital of the Maldives. A major scandal then erupted. Inspired by the police leaks, local newspapers reported that the Maldivian women were spies stealing India's rocket secrets. And selling them to Pakistan in cahoots with scientists at a space agency. Mr. Narayanan, it was now claimed, was one of the scientists who had succumbed to the woman's charms. After the day he was formally arrested, Mr. Narayanan was produced in court. The judge asked me whether I would confess to the crime. Asked what crime? They said the fact that you have transferred the technology. I couldn't understand anything, he remembers. The judge remanded him to judicial custody for 11 days. A memorable image from that time shows scientists walking down the steps of court building, dressed in a dark colored shirt and light grey trousers, surrounded by policemen. I was in a shock and then a trance. At one instance, it appeared to me that I was watching a movie with me as the central character, Mr. Narayanan wrote in his memoirs. Over the next few months, his dignity and reputation were torn to shreds. He was charged with violating India's official secret law and corruption, among other things. His interrogators beat him up and handcuffed him to a bird. They forced him to stand and answer questions for 30 hours on end. They made him take lie detector tests, even though the results are not admitted as evidence in Indian courts. Then they took him to high security prison, where one of his co-prisoners was a serial killer who had bludgeoned his victims to death. Mr. Narayanan told the police that rocket secrets could not be transferred by paper and that he was clearly being framed. The fact that India was still struggling to obtain cryogenic technology to make powerful rocket engines did not cut any ice with detectives. In the end, Mr. Narayanan spent 50 days in captivity, including nearly a month in prison. Whenever he was taken to court, hearing crowds appeared shouting that he was a spy and a traitor. But a month after his arrest, India's Central Bureau of Investigation (CBI) took over the case from Kerala Intelligence Bureau. Mr. Narayanan told federal detectives that none of the information he dealt with was classified. I don't know how this whole thing has come to this stage. We were terribly sorry, one of the detectives told him. After finally securing bail on 19 January 1995, he arrived home shortly before midnight. He went upstairs to break the news to his wife. She was sleeping on the floor in a dark room and responded only after he called out her name twice. She turned around slowly, raised her head and stayed until starting into my eyes. She had a strange expression, as if she was watching me doing something horrible, Mr. Narayanan recounted later. Then she let out a shriek that I had never heard from a human or an animal. Then the cry coursed through the house. Then she fell silent. Her husband incarceration and absence had severely affected Meenakshi Ammal's mental health. The couple had been married for nearly 3 decades and had brought up 2 children together. But after Mr. Narayanan's arrest, the austere, temple-going woman had slipped into depression and stopped talking. Apart from Mr. Narayanan, the 5 others had also been accused of espionage and transferring rocket technology to Pakistan. One was his colleague at ISRO, T. Shashikumaran. There was also Miss Rashida and her friend, neither of whom Mr. Narayanan had met before he was arrested, and 2 other Indian men, an employee of Russian space agency and a contractor. See, from these incidents, in 1996, the CBI final 104-page report exonerated at all of them. Federal detectives said there was no evidence of any confidential documents being stolen from the space agency and sold, or of money being exchanged for drawing of engines. An internal investigation by ISRO also found that no drawing of the cryogenic engines were missing. Mr. Narayanan went back to work for ISRO, though now in an admin role in Bangalore, but his travels hadn't come to an end. Even after the detectives closed the case, the local government tried to reopen it and dragged in the Supreme Court, which finally dismissed the case in 1998. When Mr. Narayanan sued the Kerala government for framing him, he was awarded 5 million rupees. Last month, the government said it would pay him an additional 13 million rupees as compensation for his illegal arrest and harassment. But from the 8 78-year-old points of view, the story is not finished yet. In 2018, the Supreme Court ordered an investigation into the role of Kerala police in the fabrication of the case against him. Mr. Narayanan is keen to see the result. I want people who fabricated this case against me to be punished, he says. One chapter is over, but the next chapter is still there. The motive for the plot against him and the 5 other remains a mystery. Was it a conspiracy by rival space power, as Mr. Narayanan suspects, to scuttle India's development of cryogenic rocket technology, which eventually become the backbone of the country's success in space? Did it have to do with rival who were nervous about India's forcing its way into commercial satellite launch market with competitive prices? Or was it purely a product of corruption with India itself? It was born out of one conspiracy, but the conspirators were different with different motives, and the victims were the same set of people, says Mr. Narayanan. Whatever it is, my career, honor, dignity, happiness were lost, and the people who were responsible for this are still scot-free. Yeah, this is the story of the Indian scientist who suffered from all this. In the final, it came to know that he was innocent and he got compensated. But finally, when we review all these things, we will conclude one point that he lost everything: his career, his happiness, his family life, his reputation, everything. So I don't know why people or whatever the conspirators, why they are doing against such an innocent persons to stop all this technology and other things. Anyway, thank you.